So let's talk about music in your family growing up. How was music treated in terms of like being music listeners and in terms of playing music?
Yeah, totally. So I come from a musical family. My grandparents are musicians, my aunts and uncles, my parents. So there was definitely a lot of music in my life growing up, and for that I'm very thankful. But none of it was string music. None of it was really all that much songwriters. I guess some here and there, but my family comes from a band background, both marching band and jazz bands. My dad is a jazz drummer, and everybody else works in, concert band, marching band, that type of thing. So the music that I was around quite a lot was kind of that more formalized music. My parents were both in the symphony. My grandfather was in the Lubbock Symphony for a long time. And I played a lot of that music growing up. My first instrument really was percussion and drums and things like that. And I was in drumline, but I really connected with the music that I connected with through my dad. He would show me different records that I really, still love, lots of R&B and country and jazz and singer-songwriters and, people like Marvin Gaye or Joni Mitchell or, people like that. So I kind of got my into like quote unquote popular music through my dad. And that's really how we bonded and things like that. But my first like real instrument that I really was taking lessons on was the violin, and I was doing Suzuki violin. So I started around 4, which is pretty common for Suzuki. And
Suzuki, just for people who don't know, it's learning by ear mainly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's learning by ear, and different teachers use kind of different variations on the pedagogy, but it's a lot of learning by ear, but also, you learn by ear and then you learn how to sight read from what you have learned. So there's definitely like a component of, at least for me, there was a lot of like reading music as well. And also a lot of like being in orchestras and things like that. Yeah.
I want to hear more about your relationship to the beat and rhythm, especially in terms of like connecting with your dad and maybe how he got you to appreciate that and how it continues to like resonate in your music.
Oh, totally. So I really started playing drums like I guess around the same time that I started playing the violin, and that really was what was most interesting to me growing up. And I would say that my playing now is like heavily informed by the drums. And I think that when I'm teaching at fiddle camps or when I'm, teaching songwriting things or whatever, like I often tend to maybe overemphasize learning about rhythm because it's just something that a lot of people don't really ever like put their elbow grease into, or it's maybe like an after fact. But for me, I think it's kind of like the root of what makes most music interesting, or at least the music that I tend to gravitate towards. And yeah, I'm like infinitely thankful to my dad for us being able to have that connection and things like that. And I'm really grateful that I was able to be in things like drumline and, learned all my rudiments. And I went to band camp every summer. Like I'm really thankful for that. And I definitely think it had a big impact on how I play and how I improvise and how I write songs.
We met through a really lovely music community, the Miles of Music Camp in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
So how do you think playing music in community makes you a better player, makes you a better listener?
Oh, God. I mean, like, the same way, like, is if you don't experience any other people and you're only experiencing your own experience, like, there's only so far you can really... there's only so far your perspective can go if you're really only listening to yourself. And I mean, I just like, this might sound sappy or like over dramatic, but at least after pandemic times, like whenever I play music with people now, whenever I sing songs or whenever I play fiddle tunes with other people, I like really feel, right, this is the meaning of life, or at least the meaning of my life is I honestly like get a little emotional thinking about how powerful it is. I don't know, like I guess it's the experience of empathy, or like feeling like you're not necessarily like in your body, like you're part of something bigger than yourself. I don't know, it feels big, it feels universal, it feels really, really good if you're doing it with the right people. And yeah, I feel grateful for it.
For those who don't know, You Are Good is a feelings podcast about movies with Alex, Steed, and Sarah Marshall, who are like adorable best friends, and they talk about movies with friends. And it's a really wonderful podcast if you haven't heard it. So not only are you editing the podcast, like you mentioned, you're also recording songs from the movies and also creating sound collages to set up the themes, which I heard you you and Sarah Marshall actually had a little conversation for your Patreon supporters, and you were kind of talking about how you make those sound collages, which is really cool. You were like listening to the themes that are being talked about, and then you throw those into the collages. Anyways, I'm obsessed with it, but I'm going to stop talking, and I want to know more about what you enjoy about the process of creating those sound collages.
Oh my gosh, they're so fun. Yeah. So so Sarah and Alex watch a movie, then they dive into the themes of the movie. They talk about the movie. They record their conversation. I edit it. At the end of the editing process, usually what they talk about is very different than what factually, they don't really go through like the exposition of the movie per se. They talk about like kind of the meta themes and like, generally what
the truth bombs.
Say it again. Yeah, the truth bombs, and kind of what movies mean as like a form of literature, more so than just like in addition to just being pop culture references. So anyways, I tend to once I've listened to the conversation, then I pull clips from the actual movie of things that kind of reflect what Sarah and Alex's conversation has, kind of dived into. And then derved. And then I write music to accompany behind those clips. And I kind of I don't really know how to explain it other than it's just a sound collage. Maybe I can just send one to you so that you can, I don't know, play it
throw
or something.
One in. Sure.
Yeah, throw one in.
That would be cool.
But they're so fun to do, especially because it's speaking of getting rid of your ego, everything for this show has nothing to do with me, which is kind of great because then you can just write just for how does this support the themes of the show? How does this make things feel better? Does it actually serve the purpose, or is, whatever. So it's really fun.
So, Alex we were all the three of us were hanging out and having a wonderful time. And Alex was talking about how good of an editor you are, that you have this natural ability to know what to keep and what to leave, that he usually can't teach someone. How do you relate to the act of editing, and how has working on this podcast impacted your editing when it comes to your own music?
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's totally kind of the same muscle, I feel. I used to work as I guess a tutor or an editor for students who were writing essays. And it's definitely the same process where you take kind of this raw piece of work, and then you kind of have to, Sarah and Alex are genius and they do a great job. And so it's generally pretty easy to shape their conversation into something that is, digestible. But, it is kind of chipping away at things and kind of thinking okay, well, does this actually serve the point that they're trying to make? Does it distract? How do we, take this section that was, you originally talked about it at the end, but it makes more sense if you do it up front. And it's the same thing as when you're editing your own songs. I'm a big editor of my songs. I'll write a song 3 or 4 times. I'll change the lyrics. I'll put it in different perspectives. It's totally the same thing. And so, yeah, I get a lot out of trying to change things around to see how they work best.
That's cool. It's like you're a god.
Trying to be, I guess.